Now, in the last module, we looked at an essay that Susanna wrote about music. Well, here is another essay she wrote. Airplanes make a lot of noise and produce a lot of pollution. One suggestion is that governments should reduce the number of flights by introducing heavier taxes. To what extent do you agree? Write a minimum of 250 words. Let's have a look at that essay. Airports make a lot of noise and produce a lot of pollution. One suggestion is that governments should reduce the number of flights by introducing heavier taxes. To what extent do you agree? Write a minimum of 250 words. It is undoubtedly true that there has been an enormous increase in air traffic over the last couple of decades or so. It is furthermore very difficult to avoid the conclusion that one of the main reasons for this dramatic increase in the growth in cheap flights. Some of the results are certainly far from desirable. Airplanes are noisy and they contribute to global warming. As a result, it is by no means uncommon to hear the suggestion that governments should make companies such as EasyJet and Ryanair pay more taxes. If they had to pay more taxes, then they would have to charge their customers more. If their customers had to pay more, then clearly fewer people would want to travel by air. It is certainly very difficult to deny that air travel causes environmental problems. However, it is also important to bear in mind that many people benefit from the current situation. In my professional capacity as a doctor, for instance, I have recently visited Australia, Argentina and Japan. Consequently, I have been able to share knowledge, experience and professional expertise with colleagues in those countries. I would not have been able to travel to those countries if the costs had been much higher. In the final analysis then, I think that it is difficult to avoid the conclusion that a better solution for this problem would be the development of cleaner and quieter airplanes. After all, that way we can have the advantages of cheap travel without the disadvantages. Now, as I expect you noticed, there are a lot of phrases here which were also used in the music essay. Recycling. Both essays are over 250 words long. They are about very different subjects. Each essay answers a question, and the two questions are very different questions. There is nothing about music in the second essay, nothing about problems caused by air traffic in the first. Note that Susanna does not use sentences like, "There are several factors which we must take into account when attempting to answer a question like this." That's not a good idea. That's a complete sentence that can be dropped into any essay on any subject. And the examiner knows that. It's 18 words that don't mention the subject of the question. Not a good idea. Susanna does something different. She writes sentences which contain phrases like this. It is by no means uncommon to hear the suggestion that contemporary pop music. It is by no means uncommon to hear the suggestion that governments should make companies such as EasyJet and Ryanair pay more taxes. Now, sentence A is clearly about pop music and sentence B is clearly about air traffic. In fact, every sentence in Susanna's essays is helping to answer the question. Okay, the phrase, "It is by no means uncommon to hear the suggestion that," is 11 words long, but Susanna is using the phrase to build a sentence that helps to answer the question. And that's good. This isn't cheating. It's something that good writers often do. When people write fluently and elegantly, they often don't write one word at a time. The man saw the dog in the park yesterday. Instead, they tend to use ready-made phrases that make their writing fluent and which help the readers to see where they are and where the essay is taking them. Susanna showed me her collection of phrases. Dozens and dozens of useful phrases. She told me that she collected them from newspapers and magazines and books that she enjoyed. When she finished reading an article or a chapter, she told me that she would go back and read it again, but this time collecting useful phrases. I've just collected these phrases from an article in today's newspaper. The argument for certainly seems strong. Indeed, it has been suggested by that. These are useful phrases. I know they are correct. I found them in a serious national newspaper, and they are just the sort of phrases that help build an argument. And notice the spaces. The argument for certainly seems strong. Indeed, it has been suggested by that. Those spaces are very useful. You can insert a word or phrase in those spaces. Imagine, for example, that the essay title is something like, "Some people say that zoos are cruel and should be abolished. What are the arguments for and against zoos? What is your personal view?" I could use the first phrase like this. The argument for certainly seems strong could become, the argument for zoos certainly seems strong. The second phrase, indeed it has been suggested by that, could become, indeed it has been suggested by naturalists that. In this way, they are entirely relevant to the subject that you have been asked to write about. If the subject was, "Are professional footballers paid too much?" the phrases could become, the argument for paying footballers less certainly seems strong, and indeed it has been suggested by footballers themselves that. So my advice is that you make your own collection of phrases. Don't use the phrases I've shown you here, or only one or two of them. Find your own phrases, phrases that you like and enjoy using.